Hello, friends. Welcome. I'm back with another very enjoyable episode. In this episode, we'll be listening to the incredible story of Luna and Adrian. Grab your coffee and sit back. Sci-Fi Traveler is about to begin. Enjoy the show. The night market on Velos Station was the kind of place where honesty went to die, usually face down in a bowl of something nobody could identify. Adrian had learned this the hard way over 3 years in the station's lower rings, and he considered himself, if not wise, then at least appropriately scarred. He followed Luna through the spice corridors at a distance he hoped looked casual, and almost certainly looked exactly like what it was. The stalls glowed. That was the first thing anyone noticed about the market. Bioluminescent spices stacked in open trays, blue and violet, and a green so electric it seemed faintly illegal, throwing light up onto the faces of 100 haggling species. Overhead, the lantern-jellyfish drifted in their slow, indifferent currents, bred generations ago to feed on the station's waste heat and to glow while doing it, which Adrian had always thought was a fairly generous arrangement for everyone involved. He repaired translation relays. This was, he felt, the central irony of his life. Every day he climbed into the station's nervous system and mended the machines that let 10,000 strangers understand one another. And in 3 years, he had not once managed to say a single true thing to the person he most wanted to say it to. That person was inspecting a tray of dried lumessa root 4 stalls ahead, her long ears catching the blue glow, her ivory skin doing the thing it did under market light, where it seemed lit from somewhere inside. Luna was Safani. She looked, to Adrian's eye, almost entirely human. The same hands, the same stubborn set to her shoulders when a vendor tried to overcharge her, except for those ears, which swept back and up to a graceful point, and which she was, at this moment, using to eavesdrop on a conversation he couldn't hear. She was a horticulturist. He knew this because she had been bringing her greenhouse sensors to his repair window for 2 months, and because somewhere around the 3rd week he had begun, with a craftsman's care and a coward's heart, inventing faults that did not exist. This was not, technically, sabotage. He told himself this often. He simply lingered over the diagnostics. He found problems the way a man lost in a desert finds reasons to keep walking toward water. Last week he had spent 40 minutes recalibrating a moisture node with nothing whatsoever wrong with it, while Luna leaned against his counter and described a fungus, and he had nodded along as though the fungus were the most fascinating thing in the galaxy, which, given who was describing it, it nearly was. His translation unit buzzed against his collar. It had opinions about his life. It usually shared them. Heart rate elevated, it murmured, in the flat, helpful tone of a machine that did not understand it was being unhelpful. Recommend hydration. Recommend silence, Adrian muttered. He should turn around. That was the sensible thing. Go back to his window, repair something honest, and let the evening close over this small ache the way water closes over a dropped coin. Instead, he kept walking, because Luna had drifted deeper into the corridor, and to stop following her now felt unbearable in a way he chose not to examine. The crowd thinned between the 2nd corridor and the 3rd. The stalls here sold quieter things, folded cloth, jarred light. A vendor named Tev, who dealt in spices and gossip in roughly equal measure, and who lifted a hand as Adrian passed. The jellyfish hung lower, the glow softened. Luna slowed, turning a small bundle of silverleaf over in her fingers, and the lantern light caught the curve of her cheek, and Adrian felt the whole careful architecture of 3 years of silence simply give way beneath him. "You're the sexiest creature I've ever seen," he said. He heard it leave his mouth the way you hear a glass leave your hand. Too late, already falling, nothing to be done. Luna stopped walking. The crowd kept moving, parting around the two of them like a river splitting at a stone, indifferent and ongoing. She turned, and her face, her ivory, lantern-lit face, shifted, white to pink, to a deep and vivid crimson, heat blooming across her cheekbones in a color he had never once seen on her in 2 months of moisture nodes and imaginary fungus. She pressed both hands flat against her cheeks, She made a sound that was very clearly not a word. Adrian stood perfectly still beneath the indifferent jellyfish, his translation unit blessedly silent for once, and understood with total clarity that he had spent 3 years preparing to be honest, and exactly no time preparing for what came next. For a moment, nobody in the corridor moved, which was strange, because nobody in the night market ever stopped moving. The market had a current. People flowed through it like water through pipe, and to halt was to invite collision. But a small bubble of stillness had formed around Adrian and Luna, and into that stillness Adrian poured the worst sentence of his life, followed immediately by several more. I didn't mean creature in a, he said, and stopped because there was no good end to that sentence, and he could feel himself groping toward all the bad ones. Not a creature. You're a very dignified creature. This did not help. His translation unit, silent for one merciful breath, came alive against his collar with the enthusiasm of a machine that had been waiting its whole life for this moment. Translation complete, it announced. Subject's response indicates joy. Adrian exhaled. Correction. Subject's response indicates distress. Adrian stopped exhaling. Correction. Subject's response indicates a weather event. How is that even a category? Recommend you remain still and appear non-threatening, the unit concluded, in the calm, final tone of a device washing its hands of the matter entirely. This was the standard advisory for an encounter with a large predator. Adrian had heard it once before, during a containment drill involving an escaped cargo beast in the lower docks, and he reflected, with the strange clarity that arrives in moments of total social collapse, that his translation unit considered telling a woman she was beautiful to be roughly as dangerous as being cornered by something with teeth. It was not, in fairness, entirely wrong. Luna had not moved. Both hands were still pressed flat to her face, the crimson now reaching the very tips of her ears, which Adrian had not known ears could do. She watched him over her own fingers with an expression he had no framework for, too wide-eyed for anger, too stricken for anything comfortable, and she made the sound again, the small, high note that escaped before she could catch it. It was at this point that Tev got involved. Tev ran the Silverleaf stall and had been watching the whole exchange with the open, shameless delight of a being who sold gossip for a living and had just been handed a season's worth for free. He leaned toward the nearest cluster of shoppers, 3 Drenic laborers picking through dried root, and began, helpfully, to narrate. He told her she was the sexiest creature he'd ever seen, Tev confided, at a volume that was not a confidence in any sense. Just said it, no preamble. He didn't, said one of the Drenic. Watch, he's about to make it worse. I am standing right here, Adrian said. He's aware we can hear him now, Tev reported. Changes nothing, keep watching. Adrian turned back to Luna with the desperate momentum of a man who has decided the only way out of a hole is to keep digging and pray he surfaces somewhere on the far side of the planet. What I meant, he tried, is that in human it's a compliment. It's a normal thing people say. It doesn't mean... But Luna had reached the limit of what any person could endure in a public corridor under blue light with a spice vendor providing live commentary. She made a small, strangled noise of pure overwhelm, dropped the bundle of Silverleaf she was somehow still holding, and turned and fled into the moving river of the crowd, the current swallowing her ivory shoulders and pointed ears in 3 steps. And there she goes, Tev narrated mournfully. Folds at the river, a classic. Adrian bent and picked up the dropped Silverleaf because he did not know what else to do with his hands. The crimson, the not word, the way she had looked at him over her fingers, none of it sat right. None of it felt like the disaster the words deserved. And then he understood why. Because just before the crowd took her, in the half-second before she vanished, Luna had looked back. Only once. Only for a moment too long to mean nothing. Did you see that? Tev asked, suddenly quiet, the performance gone. The look back? Adrian, holding a stranger's silver leaf, said nothing. That, Tev said, wasn't a no. The silver leaf sat on Adrian's repair counter for a full day, and in that time he accomplished almost nothing. He stared at it between jobs. He fixed a relay badly and had to fix it again. Twice he picked up the little bundle and set it down, as though it might tell him what to do, which it did not, because it was silverleaf. On the second day, he decided to return it. This was the responsible thing, he told himself. A person had dropped property, the property should be restored. He did not examine the reasoning too closely, because underneath it sat a far more dangerous thought, that he simply wanted to see her, and that the silver leaf was exactly the kind of pretense he had spent 2 months perfecting. The greenhouse ring sat near the station's outer skin, where curved windows looked out on the slow turn of stars, and the agricultural decks hummed beneath rows of growing things. The air there was warm and wet and smelled green, genuinely green, in a way the recycled air of the lower rings never managed. Luna's section was easy to find. It was the one full of plants Adrian could not name, arranged with a care that made the rest of the station look thrown together. She was kneeling among them when he arrived, sleeves pushed up, coaxing something pale and reluctant from a tray of dark substrate. She saw him. She went, very faintly, pink. "You dropped this," Adrian said, and held out the silver leaf, which had wilted slightly and which he realized too late, been carrying for 2 days like a man presenting a bouquet of regret. She took it. Their fingers did not touch, because both of them arranged things so they would not, which was its own kind of touch. A misting system hissed overhead. One of the pale plants made a soft, popping sound, which Adrian chose to interpret as moral support. "About the market," he started. "You don't have to." "I do, a little." "You really don't," her stomach, at that precise moment, growled. It was not a small sound. It was the sound of a person who had been so absorbed in coaxing things out of the dark that she had forgotten food existed, and it carried through the warm air with a frankness that made the translation unit stir hopefully at Adrian's collar. "Translation," it offered. "Subject requires—" "I know what it requires," Adrian said. "There's a noodle stall, 2 rings down. The steam's so thick you can barely see the person across from you, which I'm told is occasionally a feature." Luna looked at the wilted silver leaf in her hand. She looked at him. "All right," she said. The stall was little more than a counter and a few stools wrapped in a permanent fog of broth steam, run by a broad, 4-armed cook named Oss, who took their order without a word and worked all 4 hands at once in a blur. The steam did exactly what Adrian had promised. It softened everything, the noise, the distance between 2 stools, until there was only the warmth and the smell, and Luna, half veiled in white vapor, finally not fleeing. They talked. It came slowly at first, then less slowly. She was the last of her exchange, she told him. The program had once sent dozens out to stations like this one, but the numbers had thinned year by year, and now there was only her, tending a greenhouse ring a very long way from a world she described in a voice that went quiet at the edges. She had gotten good at being far from home. That was the trouble with getting good at a thing, she said. Nobody ever checks whether you wanted to. Adrian understood that better than he liked, and told her so. He told her how he drifted into the relays, how he was marvelous with machines and a catastrophe with people, how he could mend the very thing that let 1,000 strangers understand each other and still not manage one honest sentence to the single person he stopped. The steam hung between them. "In the market," Luna said carefully, "what did your translator tell you my face meant?" "Joy, then distress, then a weather event." She laughed, really laughed, bright and startled out of her. It wasn't entirely wrong. Then turning her bowl slowly in her hands, not quite looking at him. "The word you used, creature, do you know how it came across in mine? I've been assuming the worst for 2 days. It has no clean human match." She searched for it. "The nearest word sits somewhere between beloved and wild thing one cannot tame." She looked up, the crimson rising again, slower now, unafraid. You didn't say something crude in a public market, Adrian. You said something we don't say unless we mean it, in front of 40 people and a spice vendor. Adrian set down his spoon very carefully. So when you turned that color, he said, it wasn't because you'd offended me. It was because you'd confessed, she said quietly, and I didn't know whether you knew. The steam rose between them, white and slow, and somewhere beneath it the long silence of 3 years began, very faintly, to glow. Word of the night market reached the rest of Velos Station with the speed of something traveling downhill in a hurry. Adrian had underestimated Tev. This was, he would later reflect, the central error in a week composed almost entirely of errors. By the third day, he could not walk the lower rings without someone looking at him. The Drenic laborers nodded with grave respect, as though he had survived something. A cloth vendor he had never spoken to told him to be brave. And when he passed the silverleaf stall, Tev was holding court before a small crowd, gesturing broadly, and Adrian distinctly heard the phrase, and then he called her dignified, followed by a wave of laughter that he felt in his back teeth. There was, he learned, a betting pool. He learned this from his translation unit, which had somehow been added to it. Current odds favor reconciliation, it informed him brightly as he walked. You are presently 4-1. You were 9-1 yesterday. Your situation is improving. How do you know the odds? Tev updates the ledger through the station network. I am on the station network. A pause. I have placed no wager. That would be inappropriate. A longer pause. I would, however, like the record to show that I called the weather event. The trouble was that the betting pool was the least of it. The deeper trouble arrived with the news that Luna's exchange posting was ending. Adrian had known this in some distant way. She had said the last of her program in the steam of the noodle stall. But he had not let the shape of it land until she told him the date. Her transport home departed in 9 days. The Safani did not, as a rule, form attachments off-world. There were homecomings expected of her, obligations with roots far older than 2 months of imaginary fungus. And she said all of this plainly, in the greenhouse, without quite meeting his eye. 9 days felt to Adrian like a cruel unit of measurement. And then, because the universe was not finished with him, the station tried to help. Velos ran a matchmaking subroutine. Adrian had never thought about it once in 3 years, which was how he knew it had never thought about him. It was an old piece of social software, installed by some long-departed administrator with a sentimental streak, and it functioned by quietly nudging compatible residents toward one another. A rescheduled shift here, a coincidental corridor encounter there. Someone, in a spasm of misguided kindness, had flagged Adrian's situation to it. The subroutine took to its task with the zeal of a machine that had waited years to be needed. It began rerouting him. He would set out for the relay bay and find the lifts had decided he was urgently required in the greenhouse ring. Doors opened for him that should not have. A maintenance corridor he had used for 3 years sealed itself politely and suggested, via a soft chime, an alternate route that passed directly beneath Luna's section. When he tried to buy noodles, Oss's stall displayed a 2-for-1 offer that had not existed the previous day, and that Oss, when asked, denied all knowledge of with 4 shrugging hands. I didn't ask for this, Adrian told the lift, which was ferrying him, again, somewhere he had not selected. Compatibility is high, the lift replied, with the serene confidence of software that had read his file and drawn conclusions. Resistance is noted. Resistance is common in early stages. It's not a stage, it's a, stop narrating me, everyone keeps narrating me. The doors opened on the greenhouse ring. Of course they did. It was there, half resigned and half grateful, in a way he refused to dignify, that Luna told him the last thing. They were among the pale plants, and she was explaining, gently, because she could see he was already overwhelmed, that even if there were something to be done, even if either of them were brave enough to do it, her people would not recognize a human's word for it. Among the Sci-Fi, a declaration that meant anything came in a particular form. You did not say it. You grew it. You presented the one you meant it to with something raised by your own two hands, coaxed from seed to bloom. A fitting tradition, she admitted, for a civilization of gardeners. Adrian was quiet for a moment. By your own two hands, he repeated. From seed. It's how we know it's true. Anyone can say a word. A small, rueful smile. Words are cheap. Your translator proved that in the market. Adrian looked at the rows of thriving, impossible green around her, every leaf evidence of a competence he did not remotely share, and felt the specific despair of a man being handed a perfect solution in a language his hands could not speak. Because Adrian had killed every plant he had ever been left alone with. All of them, without exception. He had once been given a cactus, a plant specifically engineered to survive neglect, and he had managed, through no method he could reconstruct, to drown it. Right, he said faintly, from seed. Somewhere 2 rings down, his odds were about to get much worse. Adrian decided to do the ridiculous thing on the 4th night, alone in his quarters, staring at a seed. Luna had given it to him without quite admitting why, pressed into his palm in the greenhouse, with the brisk neutrality of a person handing over something she did not want to hope about. A common starter variety, she'd said, forgiving, hard to kill. Adrian had once killed a cactus engineered specifically not to die. He did not trust the word forgiving. He had 9 days. He now had 5. What followed was a campaign. Adrian approached the seed the way he approached a failing relay, methodically, with diagnostics, with far too much equipment. He requisitioned an agricultural grow lamp and installed it above a single pot with the solemnity of a man arming a warhead. He cross-referenced substrate ratios. He set his translation unit to monitor soil moisture, a task for which it was magnificently unsuited and which it accepted as a sacred trust. Moisture nominal, it reported, hourly, through the night. Seed status, unchanged. Seed status, unchanged. Seed status, still unchanged. Recommend patience. I didn't ask. You check it every 12 minutes. I am inferring the question. The disasters came in sequence. Haunted by the drowned cactus, Adrian overcorrected into a drought that cracked the substrate. Then he left the lamp at full burn for a cycle and nearly cooked the soil before it had grown anything to cook. Then came an incident involving a misread humidity setting and a brief period during which his quarters became, in the words of his translation unit, a swamp, technically. Word of the campaign got out because everything got out. Tev had appointed himself chronicler of the whole affair, and the betting pool had grown a new branch concerning whether Adrian could keep a plant alive long enough to confess with it. He was, his translation unit reported with something almost like sympathy, 7-1 against. Against the plant, Adrian said. They're betting against a seedling. They are betting against your gardening, the unit clarified. It is statistically a sound wager. And then, on the 5th night, the seed broke the soil. Adrian woke to a single pale green thread standing out of the substrate, no taller than a fingernail, leaning faintly toward the lamp as though deciding whether the whole business was worth it. He sat and looked at it for a long time and did not touch it. He was afraid that touching it was how he had killed everything else. What he did not know, what he pieced together only later, was that he had not done it alone. The starter pots, the correct nutrient feed that had appeared at his door without explanation. Tev had been quietly seeding the campaign from the start, slipping the right supplies into Adrian's path with the same shameless efficiency he brought to gossip. A man who had bet 4-1 on reconciliation, it turned out, was not above improving his own odds. The seedling grew. Slowly, defiantly, against every law of probability and the documented opinion of the betting pool, it put out one leaf, then another. Then, on the last possible morning, the morning her transport was loading 2 rings down, a single small bloom. Pale, unremarkable, and the most extraordinary thing Adrian had ever grown, on the grounds of being the only thing. He carried it to the greenhouse with both hands. Luna was there, a travel case open beside her. She went still when she saw what he held. "I grew it," Adrian said. "From seed. By my own, it's terrible. It leans. I think I traumatized it. But I grew it, and I meant it. In the market. I meant it before I knew what it meant, and I've meant it every day since, on purpose, which is harder." For a moment she said nothing. Then quietly, "Your sensors." "What?" "They were never broken." The crimson rose, slow and unafraid. "Not once. I recalibrated them myself every week so I'd have a reason to come to your window. I could have fixed a moisture node in my sleep, Adrian. I'm a horticulturist." A breath. "You invented faults. I invented faults. We've been lying to the same machine for 2 months." Adrian stared at her. "You're as much a coward as I am," he said. "More," she said. "I've simply been wearing it better." The transport left without Luna on it. This was not, it turned out, the simple matter Adrian had imagined. There were forms. The Sci-Fi exchange program, even reduced to its last participant, did not release that participant without a great deal of administrative throat clearing. And so the morning that should have ended with a tearful platform farewell instead ended with the two of them at a station terminal, filing a deferral request, while a clerk's subroutine asked Luna 90 questions about her intentions, and Adrian held the seedling and tried to look like a respectable reason to stay. "Relationship status," the terminal requested. Luna paused. Adrian paused. Neither of them had a word ready, because the human ones felt too small, and the Sci-Fi one had already been spoken in a public market in front of 40 witnesses. "Pending," Luna said finally. "Pending," the terminal accepted, and stamped it, and that was somehow the most romantic thing that had happened to Adrian in 3 years. The arrangement they reached was not tidy. It was full of uncertainty, a deferred homecoming, obligations renegotiated across an enormous distance, 2 careers that did not obviously fit in the same place. They had decided nothing permanent, because permanent was a thing neither of them had earned the right to promise yet. They had only decided to find out, and the strange discovery of that week was that uncertainty chosen together was a wholly different substance from uncertainty endured alone. The first was frightening. The second had just been Adrian's entire life. The betting pool resolved itself with what Tev called dignity and everyone else called chaos. Reconciliation had closed at 4-1. The side wager on whether Adrian could keep a plant alive had paid out spectacularly to the small number of beings who had bet on the seedling, a group that turned out to consist almost entirely of Tev, who had improved his own odds by personally supplying the nutrient feed and had therefore been, in the strictest sense, insider trading on a houseplant. "I prefer," Tev said, counting his winnings at the silverleaf stall, "to think of it as believing in young love." "You rigged it," Adrian said. "I invested in it. Subtle difference. You're welcome, by the way. Your seedling had no idea what it was up against." Tev tucked the last of his takings away and looked, for a moment, almost sincere. "Best week of business I've had in years. People kept coming by to ask what happened next. I should give you a commission. You should give me the nutrient feed recipe. The plant still leans." "The plant leans because it has character," Tev said, with the firmness of a man defending his own handiwork. The matchmaking subroutine, having achieved its purpose, did not gracefully retire. It celebrated. For a full day, every door on Adrian's route opened a half-second early in what he could only describe as a flourish. The lifts played a soft, triumphant chime whenever he entered, and a station-wide directory listing briefly appeared categorizing him under "successfully matched residents" before he found the override and switched it off with the grim satisfaction of a man reclaiming his dignity from well-meaning software. "Outcome achieved," the subroutine told him before he silenced it. "Compatibility confirmed. Resistance, in retrospect, was a stage." It was not a stage. The data suggests otherwise. Congratulations, I am very happy for you. A pause. I will now nudge someone else. This is what I am for. And so it came back, as these things do, to the night market. They went together this time, which was its own quiet astonishment, not Adrian trailing 4 stalls behind, inventing reasons, but the two of them walking side by side beneath the slow, indifferent drift of the lantern-jellyfish, through the blue and violet glow of the spice trays, the green so electric it still looked faintly illegal. The current of the crowd moved around them, and they moved with it, unhurried, in no danger of losing each other. Adrian stopped at the place, roughly the place, between the second corridor and the third, where the glow softened and the jellyfish hung low, where 3 years of silence had finally given way beneath him. "You're the sexiest creature I've ever seen," he said. He said it on purpose this time. He had learned over a single strange week that on purpose was the harder and better thing. And Luna did not flee. She turned and her ivory face shifted, white to pink to a deep, vivid crimson, the heat blooming across her cheekbones in that color he had seen only twice now and wanted to spend a long time learning. But it was not the same crimson as the first night. The first had been the helpless flush of an accidental confession received. This was something she had never before had cause to show, a color worn by someone who was answered and knew it and was unafraid to be seen knowing. She pressed her hands to her cheeks, briefly, out of old habit, and then, deliberately, lowered them. "In Sci-Fi," she said, "there is a thing you say back, when you mean it the way I do." "Teach me," Adrian said. So she did, there in the glow, a word he could not pronounce and would spend months mangling, and that meant, as near as the human tongue could carry it, "Then I am tamed too." His translation unit, which had been silent for an admirable stretch, stirred at his collar at exactly the wrong moment. "Translation," it offered. "Subject's response indicates—" "I know what it indicates," Adrian said. "Joy," the unit finished, and then after a thoughtful pause, "I am fairly confident this time. I have been practicing." Luna laughed, the sound rising bright into the drifting light, and a few stalls down Teb glanced over at the two of them and quietly pocketed one last winning he had told no one about. The jellyfish glowed overhead, indifferent as ever to the small human and the woman with the long ears standing still in the middle of the moving river. And Adrian, who had spent 3 years repairing the machines that let strangers understand one another while saying nothing true to anyone, found that for the first time in his life, he had a plan for what came after honesty. The plan was to stay. Some stories end with a kiss. This one ends with a man learning that the bravest thing he ever did was to deliberately repeat himself. Adrian spent 3 years repairing machines that made strangers understand each other. And during that time, the hardest sentence in the galaxy was the one he most wanted to say. We tend to think that honesty is a single brave leap, that we'll know the moment, that we'll be ready. But honesty almost never comes ready. Just as it eludes us in the wrong light, at the wrong time, in a setting where a spice salesman tells every word. Courage isn't accidental. Courage lies in deliberately repeating yourself when you finally understand the cost. And perhaps that's the quiet thing this story leaves behind. Because most of us are fluent in the language of fabricated flaws. We recalibrate sensors that never malfunctioned. We make excuses to stand beside people we can't quite admit we want to stand beside. We become so adept at distancing ourselves from the things we love that no one even thinks to ask if we want to. 2 people lied to the same machine for 2 months, not because they were dishonest, but because honesty felt like standing still in a moving crowd and refusing to run away. So I leave you with the question Adrian needs to answer, a question I think we all carry within us longer than necessary. What is the real thing you're almost trying to say? Who is the person you're making excuses to get close to? And what exactly are you waiting for? The perfect moment or the courage to repeat yourself when that moment arrives? We've reached the end of another story, friends. please don't forget to click the like button. Leave your thoughts about the story in the comments below. Subscribe to Sci-Fi Traveler so you don't miss the next story. See you in the next story. Goodbye.